Turnkey with Morgan Francis, sponsored by Integrity Roofing.
Welcome into Turnkey on Queen City News Plus, your go-to show for everything real estate in the Carolinas. We talk about the latest market trends, do's and don'ts of the industry, and provide expert advice on navigating this dynamic landscape that we call home. I'm your host, Morgan Francis, and today we're going to talk about the most important, arguably, part of the home buying process, and that is the inspection. And today I have John Nicholson, the owner of InCheck Homes, joining me. John, I so appreciate you coming on because I've wanted to have an inspector on our show since I started the show.
Okay.
And you guys are just so busy. It's hard to get someone to come on. And to your credit, you said, I'm slammed right now, but I'll let you know when I have some availability. And you did. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity.
Come on up to the mic and let's get started here. For people who might not understand what you do, what is the inspection process? And when you show up at a home, what does your day look like?
Yeah, well, you mentioned it. It's one of the most important pieces for the amount that you spend on an inspection. It's such a critical piece of it. But what you can expect is a top to bottom inspection of everything that I can access during that 2 to 3 hour window. That's anything from the roof down to the crawl space and everything in between. Electrical, that could be your HVAC, your plumbing, everything that I can look at, I'm going to look at. Everything that I can operate, I'm going to operate. So it's really, as best can be, a top to bottom inspection of the home. So
you mentioned HVAC, plumbing. Do you need to have different licenses to observe or look at those parts, or do you have to have just, is it an inspector's license? What kind of are the qualifications to become an inspector?
Yeah, that's a great question. For North Carolina and South Carolina, it's an overarching license. So you are licensed in both states. It does require 120 hours of classroom and then 80 hours of field work, as well as ride-alongs with other inspectors as you're leading up to getting out in the field. There's quite a lot. Then there's continuing ed and all of that, but it's not specifically per system. While we might be trained on each system individually, we're ultimately responsible to know things generally about every system in the house.
Have you always been a home inspector, or did you have another career? Okay, what was it?
Definitely a varied career. My previous was, I was a worship pastor. So I'm here in Charlotte for 17 years. So I spent most of my weekends singing.
Oh, wow. That's such an interesting career change. But I guess when people hire you, they know they're going to get an honest guy, right?
Yeah, hopefully they think that, right.
So it's a dirty job, right?
Is.
And we'll get into some of the horror stories if you have any later on. But what would you say is the most important part about the inspection process for you? What is the one thing that you're always looking forward to checking for, kind of the health check of the home?
Yeah, well, most importantly, it's just critical to have access to all of the electrical panels, water shutoffs, things like that, so that I can actually view them, observe them. But ultimately, you need to read the report. You know, it's useless information unless you, as the client, look at that report. So, as much as we like to turn the pages quickly, it is important that you try to look through as much of that inspection report as you can.
And we can actually pull up what the report looks like. So this is kind of a mock-up report. Obviously, 123 Main Street. That's not the house that we're looking at. But it is very extensive, and I know people out there who have bought a home before remember looking at it and thinking, oh, this is just going to be a money pit. There's so much wrong with this house. This one is 132 pages long. So, John, when people get this report, what do you want them to keep in mind as they're looking through 100+ pages?
Sure. Well, first of all, most of them are not that extensive in terms of number of pages. You'll get two different versions as the client. You'll have a full version, which is in this case 132 pages. You'll also have access to a summary, which is nothing but the deficiencies that I find in the home. Whereas in comparison to the full report, you're getting information about where shutoffs are for electric, for water, things like that. So you're getting as much information in that full report as I can actually give you as a client. Again, it's based on one day at the time of the inspection. So to be able to give you as much information about that home that you know nothing about other than the 20 minutes you may have walked through it. It's just important for you to look at that report.
You know, you bring up kind of a good point, is like the 20 minutes that you walk through it, you're like, sure, I'll buy something for hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Right.
I mean, I spend more time looking at a dress and trying to see, okay, am I sure I want to buy this?
Yeah.
And for a home, it's just such a quick process. And to that point, it's always great to, if you have the opportunity, to go back and look at it a second time, because it is a big purchase.
Yeah.
So what's in your report is not always like someone should get every single item addressed.
Right. There are specific places that are going to be more or less important depending on the condition or the age of the house.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, if you have a home that's on a crawl space can be a real problematic area depending on the age of the house, how much attention has been paid to that area. So if you're walking through a house, for instance, in that 15 to 20 minutes, and you notice uneven floors, or you notice doors and windows that are consistently not latching, or you see cracking and things like that, there's a strong possibility that there may be some crawl space issues going on. So if you have a crawl space, that's one of the most important areas. And of course, the things that we always think about, the roof, the attic, is there leaking? How's my plumbing? Things like that.
We'll get into some of the issues that you found and how to spot some of those issues in a little bit. But for someone who's trying to plan, okay, they're saving, maybe they're rubbing two pennies together to get their 5% down and then cover closing costs. How much should they also have or plan for the cost of an inspection?
Sure. That's a great question. And we mentioned earlier that it's a small amount compared to everything else that you're spending money on during that whole home buying process. So my inspections, for instance, start at $375 and go up based on age, type of foundation, and the square footage of the home. So typically you can expect to spend anywhere from $400 to $600. And then I offer a host of ancillary services. So you might add on water quality testing, radon testing, mold testing, things like that. So the price would, of course, go up from there. But typically in that $400 to $600 range. Okay.
Are there a lot of people who don't do the radon testing because it's probably just another charge?
And yes, there are several that will wave it off. That being said, it's found quite often in North and South Carolina. So it's one of those things that each person is different in their level of comfort on what they're willing to live with or not live with. And so radon falls into that category.
For people who might not understand, what is radon and why is it important to check for that?
Yeah, radon is, first of all, it's the second leading cause of lung cancer, only behind cigarette smoking. So it's an invisible, odorless gas that is continuously just coming up from the soil. It's the breakdown of rock, dirt, soil, and it's always looking for escape routes through cracks in foundation walls, or if you're on a slab, it can come up through cracks in the slab. So it is everywhere we go, but the EPA recommends that once it reaches a certain level, that we mitigate that.
Okay, good to know. How do you know, since we're kind of talking about things that you need to identify in a home, right? If I'm going through a home, or if I have my inspector going through the home, how do you know what products might be under a class action lawsuit or are being looked at by, whatever entity as a cause for concern? Asbestos is obviously a big one, but I know there's like polybutylene piping that can wear down over time. So how do you keep up on all that stuff? And do you warn homeowners or the buyers that, hey, just so you know, this type of material is in this house?
Yeah, sure. Great question. First of all, there are a lot of resources available to home inspectors, whether those are some of the large associations for home inspectors. Continuous ed type stuff is always valuable to us. But things like the polybutylene that you mentioned, there's another product called Durapex. It's a water distribution piping. Those types of things, we are required by law to tell you what type you have. We're not necessarily required to give a warning or call it a deficiency, but we are required to tell you what products are in the house. There's another product, gas piping, that's called corrugated stainless steel tubing. Again, all of these products that we've talked about have had in the past class action lawsuits.
So you say required by law. What would happen if you don't tell someone that, hey, you've got this type of piping or whatever?
Sure. Well, it's ultimately I'm liable for that. My business is liable for that. So North Carolina and South Carolina operate by a standard operating procedures. That for North Carolina, that's put out through the Home Inspection Licensure Board, which is under the umbrella of the Department of Insurance, the Fire Marshal's office. And so in those SOPs, there are certain things that are required to identify and tell them about. So if I did not identify whatever their water distribution piping was, for instance, and they come to find out later on because some catastrophic water leak, then they can come back to me and say, well, we didn't have that in our report that this type of water piping was in here.
Okay, interesting. We're going to go through some of the speaking of interesting finds, we're going to discuss some of the crazy things that John finds when he's going through his inspections. More Turnkey after this short commercial break. Welcome back to Turnkey on Queen City News Plus. We've been talking with John Nicholson, the owner of In Check Homes, who is an inspector. He is your friend when you go to buy a home because he gives you kind of the health report of your home. And John, you have had some interesting finds throughout the years. There's still plastic wrap on this range. So why is there seemingly a fire that happened?
So this is a one and only for me, but this is a brand new home that I walked in to the house and I could smell smoke. And I thought, wow, they must have windows open and somebody's burning. And then as I walked across the room, I noticed that all the burners in this brand new house were turned on with all of the packaging still on top of the burners. So they're very fortunate. That I found out later that they turned those burners on by accident the night before. So that burned all night long. And they're very fortunate that it didn't go farther than just what you see here in this picture.
Wow. That could have been catastrophic.
It really could have.
Was your heart pumping when you
Yeah.
came in and saw that?
Yes, it was.
All right, let's talk about some of the other issues that you find. What are we looking at here?
So here you're in a crawl space and you're looking at termite tubes, and that wood, those are floor joists under your floor. That wood is destroyed. I would punch it with a screwdriver.
Yep, the screwdriver. Anytime you see in the report, a picture with a screwdriver in it, that's not a good thing.
Not a good thing. And
All
that's
right.
what we're looking at. This is a wood decaying fungus. A lot of molds and funguses grow inside of your crawl space, but this one in particular, as well as some others, will actually eat the cellulose in the wood and destroy the floor.
That doesn't look good.
This is old cast iron piping, and
cast iron piping. Wow,
we see that a lot in some of the older homes with crawl spaces in Charlotte. So anytime that it's in contact with the ground, it's not a matter of if; it's a matter of when is that piping going to fail.
Yeah, and there's another kind of angle of that.
That's right.
Yeah, that doesn't look like it's operational.
It's not in
at this
great.
point.
It's not in great condition, and that is a main drain going out of your house.
Wow.
So, this is a pier with the footings exposed because of water intrusion. It just keeps washing away the dirt around it. This was water distribution. I could hear water in this particular case.
I think I can see it actually coming from one of the pipes. Like it looks like it's dripping down.
There are droplets all over those pipes, and it was again a new home.
Okay, this one I gotta hear the story about.
Okay, so we always look on the roof, right? Some of them, in this case, I walked to this one, but this is a DIY, I guess is what we would call it, non-professional workmanship. That's the
you mean
the nice way.
a licensed contractor didn't do that work?
I don't think so.
That would be actually more terrifying.
The bucket is in the best shape, but it's a bucket with a brick on top of it, and that's covering a chimney so that rain doesn't get down into the fireplace.
What is supposed to be there so rain doesn't get down into the fireplace?
They actually do make rain shields, spark arresters, things like that. So the top of a chimney should have a proper rain guard on it.
Okay. Well, hey, to be fair, it doesn't look like rain's getting in.
No, I don't think it is. But I don't think everything that should be coming out is actually coming out either.
Yeah. This one looks like it's the top of a chimney.
It is. Again, they're trying to keep birds and pests out. So there's a screen on top of that. And then they laid blocks and some sort of what looks like an automotive piece So,
Oh,
imagine
that's what that is.
I
Okay.
believe so. Imagine a windstorm coming through. Anybody below that is, in
That's
danger,
right.
truthfully.
Right. Oh my gosh, you see such interesting things.
Hmm.
Looks like some roof damage here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty significant roof damage there.
Was this an installation issue?
No, this is just an age,
Old. Okay.
deterioration, lack of care. Yeah.
I notice a lot of times. Is that a slate roof?
It is.
Okay.
Yeah. One of the old homes here in Charlotte. Beautiful, $1.5 million homes,
Mhm.
but that's what happens over time.
Does everyone ask you for like a gauge of like how many years left do I have on this roof?
Most do. And I always avoid that question.
Yeah.
I do. Yeah. I'll usually use language that says it's the deterioration is commensurate with the age of the house. If I can see significant severe damage, I'll certainly call that out. Or end of life. Sometimes the previous pictures, that's an end of life situation. So
Right.
there's really nothing protecting the interior of the house with the roof that we saw earlier.
Mm-hmm.
But I try to stay away from estimating. You really need a specialized contractor, a roof contractor, to be able to give you a better estimate than I'm a generalist. There are a lot of specialists that
Right.
include roof.
Right. And this is
contractors.
just some leaves.
Yeah, this is general maintenance stuff that really needs to be done all the time.
Well, especially this time of year when we have all the
Exactly.
leaves falling and pine needles in our area of the country. I mean, those can kind of wreak havoc on the
They
gutters.
can, if left unattended to, they're going to end up ultimately destroying wood on your fascias and soffits and things like that you're not necessarily going to see, but the damage is still happening.
Mm-hmm.
And it can become a high dollar repair once you let it go.
Your
too
home
far.
must be immaculate as we're looking through all this. I'm just
I'm not
thinking
sure
there's
about
probably
that.
one
I'm
thing
not
that
sure about that.
not one thing that isn't fixed at your
I
home.
know the people to call. How about that?
That's fair enough. I'll give you that one. This looks like a fire hazard of some sort.
Again, a brand new home. This is a $1 to $2 million home that had not yet been lived in, and I always pull the electrical panels off.
Mm-hmm.
And so what you see here is one of the screws, and it was a proper screw, but it was screwed in holding what's called the dead front, the cover of the
Mm-hmm.
electrical panel in place, and it had
Clipped.
it did.
Yikes.
Yeah, and it created a hot spot, so you can see the hole in the cabling, and you can see the signs of arcing that have happened.
So, John, you mentioned that this was a new home,
Mm.
and I would imagine that a lot of people have the mindset of, it's a new home. What could be wrong with it? Do I really need to pay $300 for an inspection?
Yeah.
How would you compare the new homes that you inspect versus the ones that might be, 10, 15, 20 years old?
Yeah. Well, the new homes are always much easier to inspect for sure. There's just less time for deterioration and degradation to happen to systems and components in a house. But that being said, I run into issues in every single house I go into, brand new or, 100 years old.
What about flipped properties? What are some of the most common issues you see from maybe people who did it themselves?
Yeah. Flipped properties typically hide the biggest problems in the crawl spaces and attics.
And how do you know? Because, a lot of times it's cosmetic and they do what needs to be done to sell it and to look good for the least amount of money. So are there ways that people can go in and identify what might be hiding underneath?
There are, but ultimately it just makes most sense to get into those spaces. And now I know people don't want to get in their crawl spaces, especially. They don't want to get into their attics. So that's why you need to hire somebody to come in and take a look at those.
You're not going to pull up the flooring to see if there's damage underneath because
No.
you can't do that for someone else's home.
That's right. It's not your home. So you have to look at it from underneath or from above in the case of an attic.
Okay. A lot of times with the attics, I would imagine that there are hard places to get to. How do you navigate that?
Well, I don't go from joist to joist in attics. Some guys might. I don't. I go as far as I can, and I'll look as closely as I can. But you're always looking from the roof. You're always looking from the attic in those areas you can for staining. Always looking around roof penetration, so where your vent plumbing goes through, your furnace venting, vents go through your roof. Those are the areas that are most likely to start leaking if there are leaks in the roof.
Okay. We have to take one more. I can't believe this show is just flying by. We have to take one more commercial break, but I want to hear some of your horror stories when we come back. More Turnkey after this. Welcome back to Turnkey on Queen City News Plus. We've been talking with John Nicholson, the owner of In Check Homes. John, again, I appreciate you giving your expertise to our show and helping people with the home buying process. We talked just before we went to commercial break about some flip properties, but I don't think we discussed this one in particular. And I lost the slide here, but give me a minute and I'll get to it. When DIY jobs kind of go wrong, this is one of them that we discussed. Obviously, some of the people who try to, fix the roof and just cut corners realistically. But this one, it looks like there's a fire and there are new boards on top. So what did you find out about this one? This seems catastrophic.
It's a little problematic and a little troubling. This is in an attic of a flipped property. The property itself looked great. The inside of the house looked great, newly updated and renovated. But as I got into the attic, this is what I found. And it was really quite shocking at first. I didn't think that it could have been, but it really was that there was a fire in this attic at some point. Mm-hmm. And so they cleaned a lot. You could tell they cleaned a lot of the ash and old wood off of it and then put new wood on top of it. So that's not to say that
that's an important part of the house.
Quite. Yeah, quite.
You mentioned structurally.
Yeah. And so, of course, I put that in the report. They were shocked, the buyers, that is.
So it wasn't disclosed that there was a fire, which is a whole other issue.
Exactly.
So those types of things have to be disclosed. Any material fact that could, be a reason that someone wouldn't place an offer on a home. And especially around here when people are putting due diligence money down, and that's something that's not refunded in North Carolina, right. Then all of a sudden you find out there's a fire and you're like, I want my due diligence money back if you're gonna decide to not purchase the home. Right. So yeah, this is a big one, and kudos to you for finding that and putting it in the report. So when buyers are going through a home, before you notice stuff like this, is there anything that they can do or they should do before placing an offer?
Yeah, definitely. Things that I would say not to do: don't necessarily get into the attics and places like that, because it's not your home yet. You haven't even put an offer on the house. But you can be looking for things like soft floors as you walk through the house. Are the floors uneven?
Is there a snake in the crawl space?
Yeah, he's one of the good guys.
This is a harmless one. Have you seen the ones that aren't?
No, I haven't actually. Okay. No copperheads or anything like that.
Oh, that's surprising to me.
Yeah, mostly.
Sorry, you were saying of things that buyers can check.
Sure. Yeah, they can be mindful of bathrooms in particular. Are the floors soft around bathtubs, toilets, things like that, which would indicate continuous leaking probably over years. They can look for cupping in wood floors, which would indicate moisture in your crawl space. Most often cupping in floors, which is literally what it sounds like, they fold up on the edges, is from moisture in a crawl space.
Okay.
They can look for cracks at corners of doors and windows. Are doors and windows easy or hard to open and close? Things like that will sort of point to what types of problems you might have in that house.
When they do finally get that inspection report, which we've shown, this is kind of what they look like, right? They have pictures and kind of what the issue is and what your recommendation is. They're extremely extensive. So what should be addressed, and what would you say falls under something that's just a little ticky-tack?
Sure. Yeah, great question. It's ultimately, it's best for you to consult with your agent. They're going to know what is more or less likely to be addressed, depending on the house and the situation, things like that. But there are things that we mentioned before, uneven floors, soft floors, things like that. Definitely would be my recommendation that you have those further evaluated by, again, we mentioned it earlier, skilled professionals, not just a generalist, but somebody who's doing that type of work every day and only that type of work. So they need to be looking for those soft floors, things like that.
Fire hazards?
Fire hazards, yeah. Panels, do you see a lot of loose receptacles, loose toilets, things like that. But then there comes the fits and finishes. Important, yes, and that's what a lot of, especially new home buyers, notice most readily, is how does it look in here? How does it feel and smell? Those things are most often easier to address than, let's say, you have soft floor seating. You may have to rip up, an entire room's worth of flooring that looks great, but there's issues in the subfloor, so that's all got to come out. So they need to be looking for those types of things, whereas the cosmetics, if there's a ding on the door, if there are, a crack in a window, needs to be repaired, but it's not as big a deal as something you might put in the roof or the crawl space.
Don't be distracted by the cosmetic or even if someone did a renovation, don't be distracted by what looks good. You have to really be critical. Okay, what if I purchase this home will need to be addressed.
Yeah.
John, thank you so much. Appreciate you coming on. I know you're a busy guy, but again, the information that you've provided to our viewers is just so valuable, and would love to have you on again sometime soon.
It will be a pleasure. Thank you.
All right. And thanks to everyone else out there watching Turnkey on Queen City News Plus. We'll see you next time.
Queen City News Plus. Just search Queen City News on your smart TV's app store.